You watched them take it. Maybe it was a project you poured your absolute soul into, a position you earned through quiet, relentless work, or an idea you shared in complete confidence. You sat there in the heavy silence of that moment, feeling the cold, sharp sting of being passed over. You watched them stand in the spotlight that was built meticulously for your feet. They smiled. They accepted the praise. They truly believed they had won. But there is a crucial detail they did not know. Something you might not have even fully realized yourself until right now. They thought they were just stealing a simple outcome, a job title, a final product. They looked at your work and assumed success was something you could just pick up and put on like a new coat. They did not understand the complex architecture of a true blessing. They did not know that when a genuine anointing is placed upon your life, it is calibrated specifically to your frequency, your endurance, and your unique mind. When they stepped into your spot, they thought they were getting a brilliant shortcut to the top. What they actually inherited was a crushing weight they do not have the spiritual muscle to carry. Right now, they are holding your stolen blessing, and they are starting to panic. The initial applause has faded, the boardroom doors are closed, and they are realizing with absolute terror that they have no idea how to generate the energy required to maintain what they took. They have the crown, but the metal is starting to burn their skin. They have the position, but the ground beneath them is already fracturing. You have been sitting in the background, wondering why this deep injustice was allowed to happen. Wondering why your energy was seemingly handed over to Munson, who skipped the suffering. You need to understand that this was not a defeat. This was a profound exposure. You are about to testify exactly what happens when the unchosen attempt to occupy a space was meant entirely for the chosen. You don't have to lift a single finger. You do not have to fight for your vindication. You just have to watch. You need to understand the magnitude of what actually transpired when they moved against you. It is entirely natural to feel the burning frustration of watching someone else take credit for your blood, your sweat, and your late nights. You lived in the trenches of that process. You built that concept from the ground up, placing every piece with deep intention and spiritual weight. When they swooped in at the final hour to claim the glory, stepping over your efforts with a charming smile and a rehearsed pitch, it felt like a massive cosmic error. It felt like the universe had turned a blind eye to simple justice. But the universe does not make errors of this magnitude. What you perceive as a devastating loss was, in reality, a divine transfer of profound liability. To grasp this, you must first understand the true anatomy of a blessing. A genuine anointing is not a static, lifeless object. It is not a title you can print on a business card, nor is it a physical trophy you can just take off one shelf and place onto another. It is a living, breathing frequency. It requires a continuous, massive flow of a very specific spiritual currency to survive. You possess that currency. You generate it naturally because the vision was born inside of your unique consciousness. Your mind, your struggles, and your spirit are the deep root system that keeps that idea alive, thriving, and evolving. They did not steal your root system. They simply snapped off a single, fragile branch and ran away with it, foolishly believing they had captured the entire tree. Think about the immense danger of what they have done. They stepped into a current of energy they have not trained to navigate. In their world, right this very second, the leaves on that stolen branch are beginning to wither and turn brown. They are sitting in the position they took from you, surrounded by the towering expectations that come with it, and a cold, creeping realization is setting in behind their eyes. The boardroom expects them to produce the same brilliance, the same effortless intuition, the same raw, magnetic energy that you naturally brought to the table. But they cannot. They absolutely cannot. They do not have the internal reservoir to draw from. Every single morning they wake up and put on the mask, the charade becomes infinitely heaviest. They are realizing that a blessing meant for the chosen is actually a weapon of mass destruction in the hands of the unchosen. They thought they were simply elevating their status and securing a permanent win. Instead, they walked completely blind into a spiritual pressure cooker that is scientifically dismantling their psychological foundation. They are quietly disenchanted of the next unscripted question, the next major project, the next inevitable moment where they will be asked to demonstrate the depth of a genius they do not actually possess. You are the source. They are merely an echo, and an echo always, inevitably, fades the further it gets from the original sound. This is why you must release the bitterness. This is your season of absolute, quiet vindication. You do not need to send angry messages. You do not need to launch a smear campaign, defend your honor in public, or tear them down to prove your worth to the world. The stolen blessing itself is doing the heavy lifting for you. It is actively resisting its new, illegitimate owner. It is aggressively pushing back against their unearned authority. You are about to watch the complete, unavoidable unraveling of a stolen victory. There are distinct phases to this collapse. There are precise, undeniable markers that prove the universe is violently correcting the scales on your pronouns. When you know what to look for, the intense frustration you feel right now will completely evaporate, replaced by a profound, unshakable sense of peace. You will finally realize that they did not take your ultimate future. They only took your immediate burden, completely freeing your hands to receive something greatly superior. Pay very close attention to your surroundings, because what comes next is the exact blueprint of their undoing. Here is exactly what happens when a mimic tries to wear a crown that was forged exclusively for your head. If you feel the absolute truth of this divine correction happening in your life right now, I want you to pause for just a moment. You have carried the heavy burden of their theft for far too long, and it is time to finally release it. Go into the comments right now and type the number 818. Leaving this number is a clear, physical declaration that you are letting go of the bitterness and allowing the universe to handle the debt. Subscribe to this channel if you are ready to step back into your own power and watch the scales balance. Now, let us look at the first sign of their quiet collapse. Number 1. The illusion of the shortcut. You look at where they are sitting right now, and it seems like they have completely beaten the system. They bypassed the months or even years of quiet struggle. They skipped the isolation, the heavy nights of second-guessing, the brutal trial and error, and they simply walked through a door that you meticulously unlocked. To the untrained eyes of the outside world, they have won. They hold the title, they receive the warm handshakes, and they possess the shiny final result of your deep labor. But this is the inescapable paradox of unearned success. The very thing they stole to elevate themselves is actively, quietly pulling them under. They obtained the destination without ever surviving the journey. And that missing journey is exactly what builds the psychological and spiritual bone density required to survive at such a high altitude. They are suffocating in the thin air of a mountaintop they were dropped onto, while you develop the lungs to breathe there by climbing the rocks yourself. For a long time, you blame yourself. You replayed the moments leading up to the theft, wondering if you were too trusting, too naive, or far too generous with your creative energy. You view their theft as your personal failure to protect what was rightfully yours. But you must completely reframe this. Your openness was not a weakness. It was a symptom of your massive abundance. You generated the idea because you are a natural creator. They took it because they are a scavenger. Scavengers rely entirely on the efforts of others because they have absolutely no internal capacity to hunt. You did not fail to protect your blessing. The universe simply allows them to walk away with a burden they cannot possibly carry, setting the stage to expose their profound lack of substance to everyone who matters. To understand their current panic, picture a desperate gardener who cuts a beautiful, blooming branch from a strong tree and clumsily tapes it to a dead stump, desperately hoping it will continue to grow. For the first few days, the branch might still look incredibly vibrant. It still holds the residual life of the powerful tree it was taken from. The thief looks at the green leaves, smiles, and loudly claims they grew it themselves. But beneath the surface, a silent, irreversible starvation is already happening. That branch has absolutely no root system. It is completely severed from the deep, dark soil where the real, unglamorous work of survival takes place. It cannot pull the vital sap. It cannot draw water from the earth. It is living strictly on borrowed time, coasting entirely on the residual energy you pumped into it before they cut it away. As the days pass, the leaves will inevitably curl, dry out, and fall to the floor, not because the environment is harsh, but because the branch has no internal mechanism to sustain its own life. They are sitting in a room full of people who expect them to continue producing fresh fruit, but they know their roots do not exist. They are realizing, with cold dread, that taking the final result without walking the required path is not a victory. It is a slow, agonizing public exposure. You cannot artificially graft yourself onto a divine frequency. The lifeblood only flows to the branches that actually survived the winter. Number 2, the weight of unearned praise. Have you ever stopped to consider what it actually feels like to be aggressively promoting for a lie you can never, ever escape? When they first took your spot, they were chasing the high of validation. They wanted the spotlight, the nods of approval from the higher-ups, the warm feeling of being recognized as a visionary. And they got it. The world looked at the final product, assumed it was born from their intellect, and gave them a standing ovation. But here is the brutal, hidden cost of stealing a chosen one's blessing. Every single round of applause they receive does not build their confidence. It actively destroys it. When you earn a victory through your own blood and tears, praise acts as a fuel. It validates the suffering you endured. But when you steal a victory, praise becomes a psychological mirror, reflecting your absolute fraudulence back into your own eyes. Every time a colleague shakes their hand, every time a superior compliments their brilliant insight, a cold spike of dread hits their chest. They smile and say thank you, but internally they are suffocating. Because the applause only confirms the terrifying gap between who the world thinks they are and the hollow, empty vessel they know they actually are. They are not suffering from imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is an irrational fear experienced by highly competent people. What they are experiencing is imposter reality. To understand the absolute trap they have walked into, picture a thief who breaks into a legendary armory and steals a suit of armor forged specifically for a giant. They pulled it out into the daylight and strapped it onto their normal-sized frame. From a distance, to the untrained eye of the cheering crowd, they look incredibly intimidating. They look like a conquering hero, but inside that metal suit, they are entirely paralyzed. The breastplate is crushing their lungs. The helmet is blinding them. The gauntlets are so heavy they cannot even lift a sword to defend themselves. They look powerful to the audience, but they know that if they are asked to actually march into battle, they will immediately collapse under the crushing weight of their own disguise. This is exactly how they feel sitting in your chair. The expectations attached to your stolen idea are the giant's armor. They put it on to look important, but now they cannot move. They cannot innovate. They are rigid with the fear that someone is going to ask them to take a single step. And the louder the crowd cheers for the armor, the more disenchanted the thief becomes of the moment they are asked to actually fight. They lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversations from the day, obsessing over whether someone noticed a slip in their performance. They know that you know. Every time they make eye contact with you across a room, all their stolen bravado instantly evaporates. They see the calm, knowing look in your eyes. You don't have to say a single word. Your mere presence is a devastating reminder that they are a child wearing an adult's uniform. They are forced to live in a state of high-alert paranoia, constantly waiting for the inevitable moment the armor buckles and the entire world sees the frail, exhausted mimic hiding inside. Number 3. The source versus the echo. When they presented your idea as their own, they truly thought they possessed the ultimate prize. But here is the profound paradox of intellectual and spiritual theft. They only possess the current iteration of the idea, a frozen snapshot of what your mind was capable of yesterday. They completely lack the living, breathing consciousness that generated it. They have the product, but they do not have the factory. And in an environment that constantly demands innovation, evolution, and quick pivoting, holding on to a static, stolen idea is like holding on to a melting block of ice. They thought they stole your future, but they actually just captured a tiny fragment of your past. In the immediate aftermath of the theft, you feel an intense, burning violation. You felt as though they had reached inside you and extracted your very essence, leaving you empty while they walked away full and victorious. It is entirely normal to feel that specific kind of grief when your energy is hijacked, but you must fundamentally shift your perspective on what was actually taken. They didn't take your genius. They only took a single byproduct of your genius. You have been mourning the loss of a single golden egg, entirely forgetting that you are the goose. Your true intellectual and spiritual property is not the concept written on the whiteboard, the strategy outlined in the brief, or the creative pitch you shared in confidence. It is the invisible, highly calibrated neural network inside your head that connects the dots in the first place. That network cannot be transferred. It cannot be imitated. And it certainly cannot be stolen by someone looking for a quick and easy win. To visualize their impending crisis, imagine a vast, deep reservoir hidden high in the mountains, fed constantly by a powerful underground spring. A thief sneaks up to the edge, dips a single metal bucket into the water, and runs back down to the village. They stand in the town square, holding up the bucket, demanding to be praised by the locals as a master of water. For a brief moment, the villagers are incredibly impressed. But what happens when the village inevitably asks for a second bucket? What happens when the village wants to build an aqueduct? The thief stares down into their single finite bucket, watching the water level slowly evaporate under the hot sun, completely disenchanted. They have the water, yes, but they have absolutely no spring to replenish it. They are completely cut off from the source. Right now, back in the boardroom or the studio, they are staring at the bottom of their buckets. The people around them are starting to ask follow-up questions. How do we scale this? What is the next phase? How do we adapt this original concept to a rapidly changing market? And the mimic has absolutely nothing to say. They can only regurgitate the exact parameters of the idea infinite they stole, desperately trying to stretch a finite resource across in demand. They are realizing that possessing your idea is a complete curse if they do not possess your mind to sustain it. They stole the water, but you are the eternal spring. Number 4. The anxiety of the fraud. There is a very specific type of exhaustion that comes from living a lie, and it is entirely different from the healthy exhaustion of genuine hard work. When you were building this concept, when you were staying up late refining the delicate details and pouring your authentic spiritual energy into the process, you were physically tired, but your spirit was incredibly full. You were operating in your designated lane. When they took your spot, they naively assumed they were stealing that same sense of deep fulfillment. But they are rapidly realizing that an unearned position does not grant peace. It only grants a permanent, suffocating state of anxiety. You might look at them from across the room and assume they are perfectly comfortable in your stolen chair. They might project an image of total control, laughing at all the right moments and nodding confidently in meetings. But underneath that carefully constructed veneer, their nervous system is trapped in a state of constant, ringing panic. Why? Because the professional world never just accepts a single victory and moves on. The world always, inevitably, asks for the sequel, and they have absolutely no idea how to write it. Consider a person who breaks into a legendary composer's home and steals the sheet music for a masterpiece symphony. They carried this magnificent stack of paper into a grand concert hall, handed out to the finest orchestra in the city, and proudly stepped up onto the conductor's podium. The audience whispers in awe at the sheer brilliance of the composition in front of them. The thief bows, greedily soaking in the premature applause. But then, the terrifying reality of their situation sets in. The orchestra lifts their instruments. The audience falls dead silent. Hundreds of eyes lock directly onto the thief, waiting for them to lift the baton and guide the music. But the thief does not know how to read a single note. They do not understand tempo, they do not understand harmony, and they have absolutely no idea how to cue the strings. The masterpiece is sitting right in front of them, but they are completely paralyzed by their own profound ignorance. This is the exact psychological nightmare they are waking up to every single morning. Every day they walk into that office, that boardroom, or that studio, they are stepping onto the conductor's podium, absolutely terrified that today is the day the orchestra realizes they cannot play. They live in quiet, unrelenting horror of the casual follow-up question. Can you walk us through your underlying thought process on this? How would you adapt this specific strategy for the new quarter? What was your core philosophy when you designed this feature? Simple, conversational questions that you can answer effortlessly in your sleep are absolute landmines for a fraud. They have to carefully memorize their lies, script out their daily interactions, and fiercely guard the perimeter of their stolen knowledge, praying to whatever will listen that nobody steps an inch outside the boundaries of what they memorized. They possess the final chord, but they are being entirely destroyed by the silence that comes next. Number 5. When the blessing requires maintenance. They looked at the sheer brilliance of what you created and assumed it was a finished, independent entity. They thought a profound idea, a high-level position, or a spiritual gift was like a stone monument. Something you just carve once and leave out in the elements to stand on its own forever. They completely misunderstood the fundamental laws of energy. A true blessing is not an inanimate object. It is a living, breathing ecosystem. And living things demand constant, highly specific nourishment to survive. When you were at the helm, the maintenance felt entirely natural to you. You did not even realize the massive amount of invisible spiritual currency you were spending just to keep the atmosphere pure. You protect the vision. You fed it with your sharp intuition, your late-night pacing, your quiet sacrifices, and your deep, authentic alignment with the work itself. When they maneuvered to push you out and take over, they thought they were just taking the keys to a luxury vehicle that drives itself. They had absolutely no idea they were taking possession of a delicate biological environment that they do not have the capacity or the knowledge to feed. Picture a breathtaking, incredibly rare exotic plant that you have spent years cultivating in a specialized greenhouse. You mixed the soil by hand, meticulously balanced the humidity, and carefully measured out the exact spectrum of light it needed to bloom. Now imagine a thief breaking in the dead of night, violently uprooting this magnificent plant, and throwing it into the toxic, completely barren dirt of their own backyard. They stand there in the morning holding a watering can, proudly telling the entire neighborhood they are a master botanist. For the first few days, the leaves remain bright green. It looks like a success because the plant is still surviving off the dense nutrients you packed into its core before it was stolen. But beneath the surface, a brutal reality is taking hold. The toxic, foreign soil begins to choke the roots. The harsh, unfiltered environment completely shocks the system. The plant begins to drop, wither, and collapse. It is dying not because it is a weak plant, but because it was never designed to survive in a hostile atmosphere. This is exactly what is happening to your stolen work right now. Their internal environment is toxic. Their daily motives are deeply rooted in ego, scarcity, and vanity, which is the absolute opposite of the rich soil required to grow a divine blessing. They are desperately pouring water on the withering leaves, calling emergency meetings, and trying to force the project to thrive under their command, but they cannot stop the inevitable decay. The spiritual and creative gifts they stole demand a very specific energy frequency to survive, and that frequency is tied exclusively to your spiritual DNA. You are watching them panic as they realize that stealing the prize also meant stealing the terrifying, heavy responsibility of keeping it alive. They cannot sustain it because they do not have the right elements inside their own spirit. The blessing is actively rejecting them. You do not have to fight to reclaim your honor. You simply have to wait for them to realize that a rare blossom will always rot when it is buried in poisoned ground. Number 6. The invisible tether. When a thief steals a physical object, the transfer of ownership is immediate and absolute. A stolen watch ticks on the wrist of the criminal exactly as it ticked on yours. But spiritual and intellectual property operates under entirely different laws of physics. They thought they could simply carry your blessing out the front door and make it their own by slapping their name on the final presentation. What they failed to realize is that a true blessing is not an inanimate object. It is a living extension of its creator. It comes with an invisible, unbreakable tether that remains anchored deep inside your specific frequency. They hold the title, they occupy the office, and they control the budget. But the blessing itself is actively, aggressively resisting them. It knows they are a stranger. To understand the sheer creeping dread they are experiencing, imagine a person who somehow figures out a way to steal someone else's shadow. They magically detach it from your feet, drag it across the room, and attempt to stitch it to their own heels. For a brief second in the midday sun, they thought they had pulled off an absolute miracle. But then they started to walk. They take a step forward, but the shadow refuses to move with them. It stretches, it distorts, and it continuously bends backward, desperately trying to reconnect with its true caster. The thief looks down at the ground and realizes with total horror that the silhouette following them does not match the shape of their own body. It does not mimic their movements. It is an entirely separate entity tied to a master who is no longer in the room. This is the invisible tether in action. Every single time they try to execute a new phase of your idea, they encounter bizarre, inexplicable friction. The team does not respond to them the way they naturally responded to you. The creative flow feels completely blocked. The superiors are hesitant, sensing a subtle dissonance they cannot quite put into words. The thief tries to force the issue, attempting to assert dominance over the blessing. They call more meetings, they send aggressive emails, and they try to artificially manufacture the organic enthusiasm that used to just easily surround you. But the more they push, the harder the blessing pushes back. It is actively pulling away from them, creating a constant, exhausting drag on their nervous system. You have been sitting back wondering why they are struggling so much with a system you built to be completely seamless. It is because the system is not broken. It is actively fighting a usurper. They thought they were simply taking your place. But now, late at night, when the building is completely empty and the screens go dark, they are left sitting alone with your creation. And in that heavy, suffocating silence, they are beginning to feel it. The unmistakable presence of something in the room that does not belong to them. Something that is sitting perfectly still, completely ignoring their commands, and just silently staring back at them. Number 7. The spiritual price tag. When they make the decision to step into your lane, they calculate the material benefits. They added up the increased status, the financial gain, and the immediate surge of external validation. But they completely forgot to calculate the cosmic exchange rate. They operate under the profound delusion that intellectual and spiritual property can be acquired for free, simply by taking it when nobody is looking. But in the realm of genuine anointing, there is absolutely no such thing as a free acquisition. Every single transfer of energy comes with a strict, undeniable invoice. Right now, you are watching them parade around with the prize, feeling the heavy injustice of it all. You are wondering why the universe allows theft to go unpunished. But you must understand that the punishment is not a dramatic lightning strike. The punishment is the unbearable, compounding interest of a karmic debt they never realized they were signing up for. They thought they were just claiming a highly lucrative result. They did not realize that claiming what is not yours automatically forces you to absorb the heavy spiritual liability attached to it. To fully grasp the nightmare they are currently living in, imagine a person who somehow tricks the system into handling them the deed to a breathtaking, historic mansion. They move in immediately. They throw massive parties, inviting everyone they know to marvel at the grand chandeliers, the sweeping staircases, and the sprawling gardens. To the people standing on the front lawn, the thief looks incredibly wealthy and blessed. But the thief did not do a title search. They didn't read the fine print of the property's history. They have no idea that the mansion is built on deeply unsettled ground, and that they just inherited every single ghost trapped inside its walls. When the parties end and the guests go home, the thief is left entirely alone in the dark. That is when the walls begin to whisper. The floorboards creak under the weight of an unseen presence. They try to sleep in the lavish master bedroom, but they are kept awake all night by the freezing, oppressive atmosphere of a house that actively wants them gone. They cannot enjoy the luxury because the psychological terror of the haunting consumes every waking moment. The haunting does not just happen in isolation. It bleeds into their daily interactions. They start to view every colleague as a potential threat, wondering if someone else will do to them exactly what they did to you. The karmic debt breeds a toxic, isolating paranoia. They can no longer trust the people around them because their own foundation is built entirely on betrayal. The mansion they stole is slowly becoming a beautiful, highly decorated prison. They are trapped inside the walls of your original vision, entirely unable to renovate, unable to leave, and entirely unable to find a single moment of genuine rest. This is the exact spiritual price tag of their actions. The blessing they stole is currently haunting them. Every time they try to relax into their unearned success, a deep, inescapable paranoia sets in. Their subconscious mind is constantly reminding them of the fraud. The universe is quietly, scientifically extracting payment from their peace of mind, their physical energy, and their mental clarity. They are financially or socially richer, but they are spiritually bankrupt, drained daily by the immense cost of maintaining a lie. They are discovering the hardest truth of all. You cannot evict a ghost when you are the one trespassing. Number 8. Your quiet vindication. Society constantly pushes a very specific narrative about justice. We are taught that when something is taken from us, we must immediately go on the offensive. We are told to fight, to argue, to publicly expose the thief, and to aggressively reclaim our territory. When they first stole your spot, You likely feel that intense biological urge to strike back. You wanted to march into the room, demand the floor, and prove to everyone that you were the true source of the brilliance. But true, divine vindication operates on a much higher, much quieter frequency. You do not need to fight for what is spiritually yours, because what is spiritually yours is already actively fighting for you. The universe is not asking you to seek revenge. Revenge is a low-frequency emotion that requires you to step down into the mud with the scavengers. The universe is actually asking you to do something much more powerful, and paradoxically much more difficult. It is asking you to do absolutely nothing. It is asking you to completely detach, step back, and simply observe the inevitable collapse. Think of a master architect who spends years designing a revolutionary, towering skyscraper. They calculate every stress point, every wind shear angle, and every load pillar bearing. Before the foundation was even flooded, a group of rival developers broke in, stole the blueprints, and built the tower themselves, taking all the credit. A novice architect will scream and sue, but the master architect just smiles and walks away. Why? Because the master architect knows they never actually drew the final critical stabilization equation on the paper. They keep the final secret locked safely in their own mind. The thieves built a magnificent, shiny tower, completely unaware that it has a fatal, invisible structural flaw. The master architect does not need to bring a sledgehammer to destroy the building. They just have to sit on a quiet hill and wait for the first strong wind. This is your current reality. You are the master architect. They stole your blueprints, they claimed your position, and they built their little tower of unearned success. But they do not possess the internal stabilization equation. They do not have your spiritual resilience, your deep intuition, or your capacity to adapt under massive pressure. They built their entire new identity on top of a foundational flaw. You don't have to lift a single finger to expose them. You do not have to point out their mistakes to your superiors or whisper about their incompetence in the hallways. The sheer, crushing weight of the position itself is going to do all the heavy lifting. The environment they stole from you is the strong wind, and their lack of genuine substance is the structural flaw. Right now, you are sitting on the hill. The wind is starting to pick up in their world. The deadlines are looming, the expectations are mounting, and the facade is beginning to crack. Let them try to strengthen walls that were never meant to hold. Let them scramble. Your silence is not a surrender. Your silence is the ultimate display of absolute power. You are simply letting gravity do what gravity always does to a house built by thieves. Number 9. The void they cannot fill. They thought that seizing your position was the final cure for everything that ached inside them. They looked at you and saw the ease in your stride, the quiet confidence in your focus, and the natural authority you carried. And they completely misdiagnosed the source. They assumed your power lived in the title on your door, the corner office, or the specific seat you occupied. They believed that if they could just violently pry those things out of your hands and pull them over to their side of the room, your entire reservoir of peace, fulfillment, and divine alignment would instantly transfer over to them like money in a bank account. So they executed the theft. They took the spot, they stepped into the light, and they waited for the magical transformation to happen. They waited for the deep, chronic emptiness inside their chest to finally vanish. And that is when the most brutal realization of their entire life hits them. Stealing your spot did not cure their emptiness. It only magnified it 1,000 times over. Picture a usurper king who gathers a band of desperate mercenaries, overthrows a beloved ruler, and forcefully drags themselves up the grand staircase to sit upon the throne. They shove the crown onto their heads, wrap themselves in the royal robes, and look out over the cheering courtyard. For a fleeting second, the adrenaline of the coup makes them feel alive. But then the doors of the throne room slam shut, the cheering fades into the distance, and the chilling reality sets in. The throne is not made of soft velvet and welcoming wood. It is made of white-hot iron. The moment they sit down, the metal begins to burn their skin, searing into their flesh with an intense, unyielding heat that they cannot escape. They wanted the power of the seat, but they did not realize the seat was forged exclusively for a very specific bloodline, and it rejected any imposter trying to claim its authority. They are sitting in your chair right now, feeling that exact burning sensation across every aspect of their daily life. They thought the achievement would make them feel complete. Instead, they are drowning in a terrifying internal void. They look in the mirror and realize that underneath the stolen title, the expensive suit, and the forced smiles, they are still the exact same insecure, hollow person they were before they wronged you. The stolen blessing did not upgrade their souls. It only exposed how completely bankrupt they were to begin with. Every single external validation they receive now feels like ash in their mouth, because deep down in the quietest hours of the night, they know they are a fraud sitting on a burning seat. They realize that true fulfillment cannot be stolen, because true fulfillment is a byproduct of authentic creation. You cannot fake your way into inner peace. You cannot loot your way into a clear conscience. While they are sitting in that scorching room, tossing and turning in a bed of their own making, you are moving freely through the world, entirely unburdened, carrying the true source of your magic safely inside your own mind where no thief can ever reach it. Number 10. Reclaiming your flow. You have spent enough time looking backward. You have sat in the heavy stillness of the violation, watched them stumble through a role they never earned, and witnessed the inevitable, quiet unraveling of a stolen victory. You saw the fake crown burn their skin, the unearned praise curled into panic, and the deep, inescapable void consumed every ounce of their false confidence. You didn't have to lift a single finger, throw a single punch, or lower your standards to pull them down. You let the natural laws of energy do what they always do. Now the chapter is closing. The residue of their theft has completely evaporated, and the stage is empty once again. You cannot afford to stay anchored to the wreckage of what they tried to ruin. If you keep staring at the disaster they made of your old spot, you will completely miss the massive, wide-open door that is waiting for you right now. They thought they trapped you by taking your place, but all they actually did was force you out of a room you had already outgrown. They inherited a stagnant past while you were instantly freed to step into an entirely new, greatly superior manifestation. The energy that built that original concept never leaves you. It belongs to your consciousness. It is hardwired into your unique frequency. While they are drowning in the heavy, toxic fallout of trying to maintain a life that was never meant for them, your mind is already clearing. The slate is entirely clean. The universe is clearing the runway for your next evolution, and this time you are stepping forward with a level of wisdom, armor, and spiritual authority that no thief can ever touch. Leave them there in the ruins of your old footprint. Let them keep the broken pieces and the hollow titles. They can have the shallow echoes because you are walking straight back toward the eternal spring. Stop looking back at the people who tried to borrow your light. Turn your face toward the horizon, because your real work is calling and your true era has only just begun. Number 11. The closing dawn. You have walked all the way through this realization, and the heavy fog in your mind has finally lifted. You no longer feel the burning sting of their theft, nor do you feel the bitter urge to claw back what was temporarily misplaced. You see the entire board clearly now. You watched them take your spot. You saw them suffocate under the weight of an unearned crown, and you witnessed the quiet, catastrophic collapse of a life built on a foundation of sand. They thought they were stepping into your victory. They didn't know they were stepping directly into a trap that their own character set for them. Let them keep the echoes. Let them hold on to the fading remnants of a dream they never knew how to dream in the first place. Their time in the borrowed spotlight is already burning out. Every single morning they wake up in your old chair. The weight becomes heavier, the panic grows sharper, and the truth of their emptiness screams a little louder. They cannot fake an anointing, and they cannot manufacture a soul. You are stepping out of the shadows of their mistake entirely unscarred. The temporary detour is over. The slate is completely wiped clean, and your energy is entirely your own once again. You are walking forward into a reality where your true gifts, your actual vision, and your authentic power are finally free to expand without interference. Turn around and look at the path behind you one last time if you must, just to watch the dust settle on their borrowed throne. Then turn your face fully toward the open horizon. Your real life is waiting, and this time, nothing can stop what is coming for you.